You're listening to Conflict Radio on the Conflict Radio Network. Greetings, and welcome to Conflict Radio. Today is January 21st, 2021, and today we're going to be joined by Jared Murphy and Christopher Dunn. Now, Christopher Dunn is the author of The Giza Power Plant and Lost Technologies of Ancient Egypt. Jared, you're there. What do you think of having Christopher Dunn on the show today?
I think it's amazing. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be great.
All right, awesome. And let's not waste anybody's time. We'll be right back with Christopher Dunn right after this. Welcome back to Conflict Radio. Jared Murphy's joining us along with Christopher Dunn. Christopher, how are you today?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Not too bad. Now, Christopher, you wrote a book called The Giza Power Plant. And for the people that don't know, could you give us a brief summary of what your book is about?
Yes, certainly. The Giza Power Plant, it was published in 1998, but it actually describes the Great Pyramid as a prehistoric energy device. And essentially, it draws energy from the Earth, seismic energy, and converts it to electromagnetic energy, and then directs it out of the southern shaft of what the so-called King's Chamber in the form of microwaves. It is the reason I started to write the book, which I started writing it in 1977, was that I was actually studying a work by Peter Tompkins called Secrets of the Great Pyramid. And Peter Tompkins brought into his work the opinions of many different researchers who had traveled to Egypt over the years, a few hundred years actually. And some of those researchers were engineers and technical type people. But common among all of them was a big question mark: what was the Great Pyramid for? Because they basically questioned the official theory that the Great Pyramid was a tomb. And so when I looked at the schematics or the cross-section of the Great Pyramid and the design layout, the architecture on the inside, and then I learned about the precision with which it was built, it appeared to me that it had the features of more of a machine than it did a construction for human habitation, or whether they have inhabited it alive or dead. I certainly agreed with all the people who questioned the tomb theory. I don't think it was a tomb. And I think in today's world, we're waking up to that, that realization that it really doesn't. There's no real support, evidentiary support for the Great Pyramid being a tomb. And so I went along with the fundamental belief that it had the precision of a machine on a scale of acres. And so if it has the precision of the machine and the appearance of the machine, I set about trying to figure out what kind of a machine it was. And then there is some kind of foundational belief that the Great Pyramid actually represented the state of the art of the civilization that built it. Today we have devices that are considered state of the art by the nature of their function, their precision, how they're crafted, and what they represent in terms of perfection. And generally, the level of perfection that we achieve in a product is recognized as the state of the art that exists at that time. So when I looked at the Great Pyramid, I said, well, this is the state of the art for that civilization. And that state of the art was incredibly high compared to a primitive kind of society that only had in its possession crude tools like copper chisels, stone hammers, wooden hammers, just basic rudimentary implements. And it also that they had an understanding and a requirement for extreme precision, because it was not just the Great Pyramid that is crafted so precisely, but it's also many other artifacts that you see in Egypt. And that precision is not something that happens accidentally. It is something that is intentional, and there has to be a reason for it, because ultimately, if you want to craft something, there is a huge cost difference between making something that is precise within, say, the thickness of a thumbnail, or precise within the thickness of a human hair, or even half the thickness of a human hair. And so what we find in Egypt is you had the shaft, the descending passage that goes down into a subterranean chamber in the Great Pyramid. That shaft, a passageway, is leveled within the thickness of a thumbnail. And so that is a level of precision that is really not required or expected for modern construction projects.
All right.
And then you have some of the blocks and artifacts that I have measured that are within a half thousandths of an inch. Like 1/5 the thickness of a human hair. The thickness of a human hair is about 2.5 thousandths of an inch, so half thousandths, 1/5 of that, and that is the precision that you find on some of these granite boxes, say at the Serapeum, which is a site near Saqqara.
Yeah, we've talked about that one. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and so when you start to key into the total scope of what they were able to accomplish, your mindset is lifted from the conventional archaeology of the area to the recognition that there was a very advanced civilization that existed at that time.
All right.
And so,
hang on a second. Let me ask you a question before we get too much farther into this, because I want to let you finish, but
interrupt at any time. It's no problem.
Is it possible that the Egyptians just stumbled upon the ruins of what was once the Giza power plant and repurposed it and used it for tombs and that sort of thing on their own? Like, they came later.
Well, that is actually an understanding or realization and a hypothesis that has been put forward to explain the gap. There's a huge gap in explaining that precision with what the tools are capable of. And so, generally, what we understand is that there was a civilization that appeared. It was destroyed. There was and probably there was a huge extinction event where there was a loss of life, and also many years, I don't know, maybe thousands of years before humanity started to recover and started to develop again technologically and actually created the civilization that we have right now. But the gap between the destruction of the Great Pyramid and then the later cultures coming into the area, yes, to adopt those pyramids and repurpose them, that is a popular concept and one that I think makes a lot of sense, because there's no other explanation for why the technical proficiencies are not explained by these later cultures that repurpose them.
I think you've walked. I mean, we've seen. Well, I've read everything you've done, and I've definitely seen you. Even recently, you were there with Uncharted X with Ben, right?
No, I was not. I did not travel with him.
You just interviewed with him. You did a video thing, right?
Yeah, I did an interview with him.
Yeah, I know you do a ton of stuff, and I think one of the people I was curious if you knew, because we usually dig a little deeper on the show as far as me having the background I have, having the interest in this work and the subject right down to soil. But I have a couple questions for you. One is, do you know Dr. Joseph Davidovitz, the geopolymer, and his theory on maybe that some of the I don't want to dwell on the Great Pyramid is fascinating, but I do have two specific questions. One is Dr. Joseph Davidovitz, the father of geopolymers, had theorized that that popular theory that maybe the Great Pyramid was poured in place, and I think everyone's kind of on the I think it's a solid indicator that there are quite a few blocks. There's polygonal nubbed construction, and so it's clear that it's been built. But I'm wondering if what from Yale, and there was a couple of researchers that all confirmed that, yeah, it appears to be that in its course of running as a machine, that in agreement that it's likely the Giza power plant is a machine. At some point, it appears that there are geopolymers here and there. So I'm wondering if it got impacted either through accident, weaponized disaster, who knows. But at some point, they patched it here and there with geopolymers, but didn't build it. We don't seem to have a narrative, a story where we start with the fact that this is a machine that would have been running, which would have required maintenance, which would require also repair work, right? And so the question is, A, do you know Joseph Davidovitz's work on that or his thoughts on geopolymer? And then the second one was, forever, as I've been fascinated by vibrational frequency stuff. And I was wondering if you think from what they've identified within those shafts within the Great Pyramid, is there any current research that you know of that would indicate that those shafts are more like organ pipes, in the sense that how you move them up or down, if you had something in it, it could change the frequency or vibration of what would be generated from within?
Okay, I'll address the Davidovitz. Yes, I do know of his work, and I accessed his book when I was writing the Giza power plant. And also I accessed a lot of journal articles that addressed the claim that the pyramids were made out of poured stone, or geopolymer, as he calls it. My opinion hasn't really changed, and to your point, you go onto a building site, you'll see many different methods of construction. You'll have stone, you'll have cut dimensional pieces, you'll have pieces come to the site and they're cut on site and fitted in, and then you'll have concrete or other kind of materials that are poured. So to say definitively that I have found evidence of a geopolymer, therefore geopolymers explain everything, I think is a little misguided and incorrect. To say that here's evidence of cut stone, because what we see here, we see these saw marks, and tool marks on the stone. To say that now that I've found tool marks, then everything that I see on the Giza Plateau had to have been cut. That is equally incorrect, because you will see on the plateau, you'll see evidence of what you might call geopolymer. It could be poured gypsum or some kind of slurry material that hardens. And there's evidence of it outside the Great Pyramid the basalt pavement on the east side. You will see that the underside of those blocks are very rough, and they seem to be seated in a bed of concrete or gypsum or whatever that allowed them to set them just like you would tiles in a bathroom. So, that's, and then to your point too, to do some patching in an area, why not? If that improves the looks or the function of a particular machine. Certainly today we build machines, and where there may be machining mistakes and gouges cut here and there, those areas are filled in and smoothed over. So when you look at how we do things in the real world, it makes sense to say, well, maybe they had the same solutions for the problems that they were faced with, and
yeah,
humans,
maintenance and adaptation over a period of time. Yeah, there's just no way
sure.
that they didn't maintain it.
Sure, yeah. So the thing is that the argument about whether the pyramid was poured or quarried, or the stones were quarried, cut and placed, I don't think that is a valid argument.
No,
To have. I won't even debate it,
No.
If you want to, if you say geopolymers existed back then, I'd say fine, yeah, great. But if you, take me to a granite block that has obviously got machine marks on it, and it looks like granite, and it has the precision that I've seen, and say, well, that had to have been poured too, because you're a supporter of the geopolymer theory, then I would have to disagree.
Yeah, I just think that it's been patched, and people just don't include the narrative of you're a highly advanced society. You're not going to tear down the building if it breaks or cracks. You can also use, if you're good with material sciences down to the ancillary machines, like in the restoration world. I mean, I'm around water jet cutters. I'm around what they're doing with granite to polish and cut and do counters, and I have friends that are jewelers, and I've watched them make everything from scratch. So I understand it at that level. But I'm also a big fan of spintronics and quantum mechanics and the graphene conductors and what they're using on small material sciences. If you're going to have a giant building like this that also has polygonal blocks that look like they're cymatic, that look like there's a layer that's been so weathered and gone, we can't predict what was done originally, especially when there's been 6,000 years of dynastic repairs and modifications. It's just,
well, yeah, and some of the blocks. When you talk about the polygonal shapes, you find them near the second pyramid, Khafre's pyramid. But a lot of those shapes were created when they were stripping the pyramid and using the granite for building material. And to do that, they were slicing off corners, of these pyramid blocks that had the angles on them, and they would actually cut, chisel into them with whatever tools they had. They're actually like Roman quarry marks. And you find those Roman quarry marks at the Aswan quarries too. And that was one of the things that was very remarkable to me, was in 1986 when I visited Egypt, and I was going around the Giza Plateau, and I was looking at these blocks. And then I went to the museum, and I was talking to an Egyptologist and asking him about the tools that we used to cut all this granite, because it seemed to me that if they had representative tools that you can make a study of that, determine if they're capable. He took me to a case in the Cairo Museum, and they just had a few chisels. And I said, how is this possible? And he said, well, to really understand how they did it, you have to go to Aswan. And so, I went took a flight to Aswan to look at the quarries, and I saw the same marks at the Aswan quarry. which led me to believe that they were just using those quarry marks to quarry the material rather than finish it off.
So I know that the Serapeum is, ironically, and at least in our vernacular, it's discussed a lot,
Right.
but we were just on with Mohammed Ibrahim. We got to interview him, and one of the things he was talking about were the largest boxes that have been found that are way in the back that you can't see. I've been wanting to ask you, on the note of tool marks and things you've seen recently, I have a big question, and one of them was just, what is the latest things you've seen and found? But in reference to the Serapeum, I had heard two things. One, that the biggest box that they found is over 100. Well, Muhammad said it was over 120 tons. And I wanted to know if you had seen any of those that were in the back, not just the one that, of course, you've been famously photoed in. And at the same time, I had heard further that there are other was priorly explored over 100 years ago, but that there are sections of the Serapeum that are still not accessible, that are possibly dangerous, but have even more containers. And I'm wondering if you know anything about that also.
Yeah, that's an interesting story behind that. In 2018, I conducted a tour in Egypt with Mohammed Ibrahim, and we were at the Serapeum, and he had arranged with the guard, one of the guides there, to access the area that you're talking about, because it was under lock and key at an iron gate. And while we were in there, one of the guests on our tour was talking to one of the guide who Muhammad had arranged to access this area, and she had told him, identified me as being a popular author and published the Giza power plant and lost technologies of ancient Egypt, and so at that point, when he learned who I was, the price to go in there shot up significantly, and we couldn't afford it. So I was denied the trip. Yeah, I know. It's like, wow, you just never know. You never know. I mean, it was certainly innocent enough, and just being chatty, I suppose, not being aware of what the consequences might be. But anyway, that happened.
No, so
maybe I will be able to go have access to it in September. I'm doing another tour with a gentleman by the name of Next NEXT in September.
Oh, that sounds familiar. Yeah, I was wondering, because I know I mentioned before we started about engineered soil, and one of the things I'd mentioned to Mohammed was the same thing, that in the reference to material sciences, seismic metastructures are materials you use to support a building, whether they're nano crystal sized or whether they're larger, like a stone sphere, right? And so one of the things he had mentioned was what's possibly under the Great Pyramid itself, what's under these large polygonal blocks. And again, it's how many layers. When we build a modern home, like in the north here where I am, they're very short footings. They're only about 1.5 feet, 2 feet, and all they care about is the structure itself. But if you're engineering soil, not just for growing, but for piezoelectric properties, and in this case, if you're building a giant structure that even in dynastic periods, even though these structures seem to be thousands of years older, they don't really move much. And I can't help but think, as a builder, that just like the machining that's going into the precision that's going into the boxes, that to build a structure like this, the foundation itself has to be a composite of materials. That it'd be interesting to me, like you said, you went to Aswan, and I wanted to ask you about, of course, this giant, unbuilt obelisk, but at the same time, you have this quarry that's so many hundreds or thousands of miles away from wherever the sites, wherever the stone was brought, whether it's Baalbek or Lebanon or somewhere, and the Giza Plateau. But it makes me wonder if we start doing core samples, whether it's Machu Picchu and Tiwanaku to the Great Pyramid, if we start seeing that the very engineering that's going into the very foundation, the core sampling of the actual foundational material below the structure, is going to be a composite of material from quarries thousands or hundreds of miles away, or there's a layer. I have a friend of mine, an archaeologist, that said, well, what if there's a whole layer of foundational material that's strictly just a seashell, but it's a particular kind that's very strong, and or if it's artificial. But we haven't done any of that kind of sampling to figure out those structures, and we're finally, with your help, putting eyes on the machining quality of these boxes and or these other things that just don't, like the schist disc or the just all the different things that we keep finding. And in thinking about all of it, I'm wondering, did it ever occur to you? I'm wondering, in the Serapeum, they have the box that's in the hallway that looks like they dropped it, and just the unfinished box that they just dropped it. And it's always pointed out that there's no room on the sides to carry it. I'm wondering, did I think you know Yusuf also, right? Yusuf and Mohammed.
Oh, Yusuf Awayan, yeah.
Yeah,
I've known him for many years.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, and this is why I'm so excited to talk to you. This is one of those things where it's like the question that's been bugging me. One is because no one's ever lifted the box. Again, if we assume, well, if it was on rollers, it crushed the rollers, but it's flat on the ground, and that means I don't think anyone's ever looked under it, right?
Well, I haven't.
Right.
tell you that, right? No.
Yeah.
One of the things I can tell you, though, you talk about what is under the Great Pyramid. To my knowledge, it's just set on the bedrock, and there is an outcropping that actually keys it to the site.
I heard it's cut. It's cut in. It's like set. It's like set in like it's a platform for it and set into it.
Right. But also, I know that the report that came, there was some excavation in 1986. Actually, it was the first year that I traveled to Egypt. There was a French team that were doing some bores inside the Great Pyramid in the Queen's Chamber horizontal passage, and they hit a void, and actually quartz sand came out. There was it was just sand. They thought that they had detected a void in there, but they just came across sand, and then they closed up their exploration, and I don't know. I don't think that anything has happened since then. But I found that to be a very interesting discovery, that they would find that kind of material in that area, because one would assume that the whole pyramid was solid. But now they're finding other voids. The recent Scan Pyramid project.
The muons.
Yeah, the muography. And that's very interesting and has some significance to the Giza power plant theory. So yeah, I mean, there's there is enough out there for fertile minds to come up with all kinds of questions.
Which is where are you right now with all the? I mean, I have archaeologists that tell me things that are like, Jared, you can't repeat this, and so I do know work that's been done in that area where I know there's some pretty crazy things found. At the same time, for what you could talk about and for what you are interested in, where is your mind going right now with what you think? What's your current bird's eye view of what you think we're looking at?
Well, I am delighted.
Not for the dynastic stuff. What do you think we're looking at for this ancient lost high society?
I don't think. Well, the Greek Giza power plant theory uh, is alive and well, and there is a
Totally.
lot
Yeah.
more evidence to support it. And I am currently working on a proposal for my publisher to write another book that will incorporate all the new discoveries and also those that have been made since the original book was published. And so, you've got a lot of evidence that has come to support the Giza power plant, and sorry.
Oh, am I totally off on the shafts being more like a resonating tuner shaft?
Well, actually, I was going to mention that you are not off at all. Um, in fact, when I decided to start collecting research information to update the Giza power plant theory, and looking at where I could strengthen that theory and bring in some more information. One of the huge areas, in fact, it was key. It becomes more prominent is the acoustics, and so I had reached out to an acoustic engineer who I'd consulted with him when I was writing the Giza power plant. But I'm sure you remember reading the Giza Pyramid. It was more like a detective story, looking at every single piece of evidence that was available, and seeing if it would actually fit in within an all-encompassing kind of systems kind of analysis on the function of a machine. But it included, even the slightest detail for what was found above the king's chamber, or what happened to the king's chamber. But your definition of the passageways as being analogous to organ pipes is spot on. If I would, if you would talk to my research colleague Robert Water, he could regale you with a lot of information on the passageway organ pipes and their dimensions and other significant details about them.
I will take that offline right after this.
I'm sorry,
I would love to.
Can you tell me again who that was?
His name's Robert Water. He would be a good one to talk to.
Well, I'm still working on. I outlined my second book while my first one was about to go to market. I spent all of January in South Africa at Waterval Boven, looking at those stone circles and those thousands of kilometers of unexplored ruins that have been written off. I also climbed. So I spent South Africa outlining my next book, because you can't cover genetic memory, conscious water, structured buildings that are using cymatic polygonal blocks and stone spheres with the latest sound and frequency reports that were coming out of Europe in 2019. I was able to include that in the book about seismic metastructures and the amphitheaters and how all this seems to be engineered. And as you pointed out, I'm talking about engineered soil like terra preta and what's it doing in North Africa and in Australia. And it's not just for growing. You have large earth circuits like the Nazca lines, like the Jordan lines, like sorry, there's a train going by in the background, but there is a large earth circuits into the ground. They're not just, it's not sexy to talk about engineered soil or seismic metastructures and nanoarchaeology, and the guts of this construction isn't set into the earth for no reason. It's not set into the tools, the measurements required to say, well, if there's earthquakes in this area, it's 2 miles deep and it's 3 miles that way. So when we build this polygonal blocked wall, it has to have this pattern in it. And it's going to be set on a foundation that's connected to this soil that's connected. There's so many subjects that I ended up outlining in the next book. So I continue to do research and, of course, do these shows. But at the same time, I think your work is invaluable for anyone who needs a handbook on what's going on. But if the researchers don't keep connecting and we don't keep writing and speaking on it, it doesn't go anywhere. It just sits to be, one theory. And I think someone has to keep rolling the ball forward, even if there's resistance from different academic corners.
Oh, well, yes. I kind of I've skirted academia. I kind of knew how they would respond to my book, so why waste your time trying to convince somebody if they don't want to be convinced? So I've spent most of my time discussing with engineers and technical type people. And that does seem to, the interesting thing, I'll tell you a story. I came to the internet in 1995, and there was a bulletin board service called Deja News. I'm not sure if you knew about that. But anyway, I got my first publishing effort was an article called Advanced Machining in Ancient Egypt, and it was published in Analog Science Fiction Science Fact. And it was published in 1984. And so in 1995, a reader of that original article somehow found me and sent me an email and told me that the advanced machining in ancient Egypt was being discussed in on one of these bulletin boards on Deja News. It was the alt archaeology discussion board, and invited me to join. That discussion went on for a few months, and there was some crusty old scholars on there, and I think at one point I was accused of being a lone voice in the wilderness, like who's listening? You're a lone
take
voice. That. Yes, right. And so that's how I started out, as a lone voice in the wilderness. And now you've got thousands of engineers who are, adding their voice to the research. It really is a groundswell of support and like a movement. Everybody's talking about it now. And,
if you go, go ahead.
And so there you go, and it's not like I had to do anything to drum up that support. I did. I had to, first of all, write my book, and then, just discuss it with people who wanted to discuss it with me. But the other thing I did is I kind of like, I thought to myself, the people who would really benefit the most from this different point of view of history would be the Egyptians themselves. And so, the thought that I had when it came time to collect all the new information was to write a book on just the engineering, the machining capabilities of the ancient Egypt. It seemed like
the lost technologies of ancient
right.
Egypt.
It seemed like, the Giza power plant. I mean, that was like a bridge too far, I think. Even when it was written, it was pretty revolutionary.
I'm right there with you. When I sat down to write a book that said, I'm about to say that everything happened before church and the Garden of Eden, and I'm also going to say that it's not aliens. The title of my book is "It's Not Aliens, Worse, It's Us: Discovering Our Lost Technologies," and it's all about a lost prior ancient human population. It's easier for people to jump to the conclusion that it's interdimensional space traveling aliens rather than we are not the most advanced as we've ever been. And it's clearly these people had a hold on geotechnologies and machines that we are just barely getting. We're barely making shiny countertops. It's just,
Well,
I thought I'd piss off everyone.
I agree with your point of view. I don't think we have to. We're at the place where we should, disrespect our ancestors or even disrespect different cultures. I would not
not at all.
the credit to aliens.
Right? Why can't we have done it?
Yeah, and that's why I think the idea. I dedicated my last book to the Egyptians and their glorious heritage. And in my discussions with Muhammad, Ibrahim, Yusuf, and other Egyptians, that is perfectly acceptable. They definitely are supporting the idea that
Zahi and you are pretty close then?
Well, Zahi is not a person that I would try to convince. I really don't care. I mean, I've met Zahi and I understand his nature. I think if he thought that there may be something in it for him, he may support it. But he has other forces that are influencing him. But the tour guides, they have been surrounded by these technical type people, engineers who are going through Egypt, and they're telling him the same story that I'm writing about. And actually, a lot of them are carrying my book to Egypt with them.
Yeah.
And so he's like, okay, I buy it. I'm convinced. In fact, Mohammed he's a great guy, great tour guy. I left him with my straight edge and square so that he could actually
nice
demonstrate the precision the way I have, and also educate his fellow tour guides so that they would understand it more. And now he's telling me that most young people in Egypt are not even interested in the old stories. They are more interested in this idea of their ancestors being much more advanced, and the artifacts that they have in their country being super advanced too.
So we've lost. We've lost. Go ahead, Michael.
Jared, I have a question. I want to jump in here for a second. I'm curious about the mercury that has been found in the pyramids in the Americas. Now, do they have mercury discovered at all in Giza?
Not to my knowledge, no.
So why would they need the mercury?
I've heard the same thing, and I think it's intriguing. Also, the existence of layers of mica in
that's true. Yeah.
I think all of that is very interesting.
The mica, Michael, is
and it's I mean, the thing is that it's a huge subject to try and understand. And when you go to different countries and you go to different ancient sites, you're faced with I think a different understanding of the same kind of science and technology, and a different application of technologies to demonstrate that. So, the pyramids in Mexico are different. You have the puzzling artifacts in Bolivia, like Pumapunku, Tiwanaku. There is all this evidence all over the world of advanced knowledge and the application of tools that no longer exist in the archaeological record. So, it's a huge subject. You can't possibly address all of it and do it justice. I've taken a particular aspect of it and tried to, put forward the best evidence possible to support, my ideas. But I can't, I can't do everything. I'd love to go to India, but I'm 75 years old now. A lot of my traveling days and energy is not quite what it used to be, I'm afraid.
Oh, it's around the corner, Chris. You could be going for like another 40 years.
Well, thank you. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But
if you saw my medicine cabinet, you'd be going, "Oh no, oh poor guy."
Now, not to quote Plato, but let food be thy medicine, or medicine be thy food. I think that was Plato.
Yeah.
So if I open your pantry, is it going to be filled with cakes and sweets?
No, sir, no.
Am I going to get you in trouble?
Me in trouble?
No. Oh, well, it's when you're taking the hot bus to, what's the average temperature on the plateau?
Oh, well, I mean, it goes down to 60s in the evening. It depends what time of year it is, It could be in the mid 80s, down to the mid 60s.
Oh, that ain't too bad. I feel like
summertime you going into the 90s, but you go south and you could be north of 100.
Ouch. So what about some of those locations though? I mean, like India, we've talked to Michael Cremo a couple times, and he talked about a city that he wanted to excavate. He had plans for, got shot down for the Antiquities Ministry in India because the city had a wall. The exterior wall was for sure 5,000 years old, but the interior walls were much, much older. And they already knew that, and they had applied. And we were talking about cities in India that could at least correspond. Some of the, I don't know, as far as like from what you've seen in Egypt, or what chatter have you heard about, pre-dynastic peoples as far as the genealogy? Do you feel like there is a connection with the hairpin then with the Indian society? Do you think maybe there is maybe the more advanced? Yes, there's a worldwide culture from Tiwanaku to Egypt to Angkor Wat. There's definitely polygonal masonry. There's keystone cuts. There's stone spheres. There is, I know, new topic, but there is engineered soil, biochar engineered soil all over the earth in places that were supposed to be just nomadic peoples. That's my thing. But at the same time, it's everyone's thing. And so we have this layer. And again, as a builder, remodeler, construction guy, I do design build just like you do your engineering, and I look at some of these constructions and I'm like, yeah, they built it with laser cut unexplained tool polygonal masonry and finished it with river rock. That makes perfect sense. And then and the other one, Chris, that they never point out, I love this one. They can cut these stones and bring them from thousands or hundreds of miles and across river rock terrain, height, you name it, can do all that. But then every time you get an artist rendition of the building, they're like, yeah, but we don't know how to cut wood. So everything's like lean-to sticks on top for a roof. That's how you finish off every ancient structure. It's just whole logs and twigs and a thatched roof.
Well, where are you talking about?
Oh, well, like Göbekli Tepe. They got 5% of it dug up. Or Machu Picchu, you got polygonal masonry, and then you got rubble at the very top. And then they always show the rendition of what it would have looked like when the roof was finished, and it was always a logged, very primitive, very in tune with Inca finishing or Aztec work. And it's always, okay, but how do you explain the very well-shaped polygonal masonry and whatever they use to do that? They don't know how to carve intricate wood finishes. They don't know how to do that. It just makes this dialogue. Anyway, I digress.
Well,
the dialogue.
You have the same situation in South America that you do in Egypt. They found what they claimed to be the workers' village. They just found this an earlier settlement. The construction style was very primitive. The walls were made up of very small elements of stone, and they were not crafted very finely or fit together very, very well. But they cobbled it together, and there was a culture that actually occupied that area back at some point in history. My belief is that it's a later culture that settled in the area. Certainly not reflective of the abilities of the pyramid builders. There's no remote attempt to build structures that were precise or modern. For instance, if you go into, say, Bedford, Indiana, where they have a lot of limestone quarries, and you look at the homes of the quarry workers, you'll see that the limestone houses that they built were very finely cut. I mean, they exhibited the state of the art that they used and when they were quarrying stone for, say, the Empire State Building. And I actually visited a family, a quarry worker in Bedford, near Bedford, Indiana, who had lived in a beautiful limestone house. Nicely built. The blocks fit together very well. But compare that to the workers' village near the pyramids, and there's no comparison in the quality and the fit and finish of the building blocks. And talking to the quarry worker, I said, "Well, what kind of tolerance, what kind of precision did you work to?" And he said, "Well, about 1/4 of an inch." And so, that is the difference, the perception of the particular worker. You go from working in wood, you go to working in a quarry, and then the division of the trades and how they separate the different skills. You go into a manufacturing plant, and you would have machinists. They would work to within a certain tolerance. Tool makers would work to within a higher tolerance. Gauge makers would be a higher tolerance yet. When I say higher, I mean the difference between perfection and what you are allowed to create. The difference between that dimensionally would go from, say, a machinist is like 1/1000th of an inch, a tool maker maybe 1/2,000th of an inch, a gauge maker maybe 50 millionths of an inch, in precision. So those different manufacturing classes are at play throughout the world today, and it's well understood that you try to separate that, or you try not to mix the skills, because you don't want a machinist to be working with the deliberation and exactitude that a tool maker does, because it would take more time, and you need to produce things very quickly. Likewise, you don't want a tool maker to work with the speed and efficiency that a machinist, because you want him or her to be very, very careful and exact and precise with what it produces. But that is the world that I worked in for over 50 years. It has changed somewhat over the years, because the machines now are more accurate. The variables have been worked out, and they can get closer to that ideal perfection that we try to shoot for.
I know we can only speculate, but it just fascinates me what they could have done with their cutting abilities for the detail. So I feel like having you on, it's just such a waste of time to repeat the scale that these buildings were done at, constituted measuring and calibration at a scale that only an engineer or someone who does fine work would and again, even stonemasons would understand how difficult it would be to create this work. But we could only speculate on how the finishing, again, we have a filter on where we say, well, that's it. They built these really cool buildings. And then, but are we looking at, like in the case of in South America, like at Sacsayhuaman or Ollantaytambo, are we looking at a foundation of a structure that was polygonal to the base? And are we missing the 3, 4, 5, 10-story wood structure that was over it? Are we not seeing that the metal and the thousands of years of dusting and repurposing of material, that when you get down to the stone and when you get down to things that have been repurposed even by the dynastic Egyptians down in the Serapeum, they tiled around those boxes. But we're constantly amazed at what we're finding, what's left. I have 2 clients that I remodeled their period home. They are machinists. And for people who don't understand this, I mean, we say it, we sound like we're saying something impressive. I want to make it really clear to people that when you said calibration measuring, my brother's an airplane mechanic and he gets it. But for those out there that don't quite understand, these calipers and these different devices and tolerances that are used to create the measuring devices that Chris is talking about are so thin and finely cut that even though it wasn't nanotechnology, or you think it was, that I want to explain this, that I'm remodeling a 1912 bath laundry for 2 machinists that work at 2 separate, they're a husband and wife, and they work at separate machine shops making, billionths of an inch. They make all the things that Christopher's just talking about. Now, I got a sliver one day, and I thought you would like this, Chris.
Yeah.
I got a sliver, and I'm used to doing what any other design build guy does. If I'm on a job site, I'm going to take a utility knife or tweezers, to which before I could do either, I said, oh, I got a pretty decent sliver, but it's in there. One of the machinists that I was working for said, oh, you're really going to like my caliper. You're really going to like my measuring device. And I said, what is this? And she goes, well, I use it for determining tolerances for some of the things that we're machining. They have very specific tolerances. And she goes, you should use this. I use it all the time to take out slivers. And I take this caliper, and the ends of it are so fine and so thin that I, for the first time in 30 something years, I pulled out a sliver without even breaking the skin. It was so finely finished at the very end in order to create this. And I'm looking at the gauge on it, and if that and lots of people can think of taking out slivers and kind of, graphically, really just try to getting to the slivers really hard. This measuring instrument was so fine at the very, very tips that they were beyond needle quality.
Yeah.
And it's just brilliant, this work that was done. But I think in dialoguing that and erasing, just tabling the facts and looking at these constructions, and yes, they've been adapted, they've been repurposed, and you just don't start out with a building with such fine masonry at one level and just stack rocks on top. That's not, I'm tired of repeating that that's not a single culture. Or
No, I think your main point is that later cultures came in and they started to build on top, which you do see in Peru at Ollantaytambo and also Sacsayhuaman and other sites around Peru, where you have these monolithic stones that are finely fitted together. And then you have these very, very small elements that obviously were, exhibited the capabilities of a later culture that were not, they didn't have the technology to do the lifting, which I believe the ancients had the ability to defeat gravity when they were moving these very, very large blocks of stone.
Well, couldn't they lift them with frequency?
Sorry?
Couldn't they lift them with frequency?
I think that I haven't been able to do it myself, so we can speculate. But generally, what I have stated and written about in my book, I cite the work of Edward Lee Scanlon in Homestead, Florida, who claimed that he knew the secrets of how the Great Pyramids was built, and he was single-handedly moving multi-ton, 30-ton blocks of coral. An obelisk that weighed 23 tons. I mean, certainly not as large as the stones that went into building the Great Pyramid, or as large as the obelisk that the ancient Egyptians constructed, but still.
Now, let me let
Very
me let me ask you another question. If the Giza pyramid was a power plant, what was it powering?
that is whatever they wanted to. That would be my answer. That is a question that is always on people's minds. What were they using the energy for?
I think it was multi-purpose too.
Yeah, and the thing is it's not just that. It's how did they distribute the energy? So
Well, wasn't
when
there a lot of rocks that they had laid out that the kind of stone that it was actually transmitting the current through the stone?
that is a possibility. The energy coming out of the Great Pyramid would have come through the southern shaft in the King's Chamber. From there, it exited into the atmosphere, and it would have actually been used, collected by whatever means they found necessary to it. I even speculated in my book that it could have been bounced off a satellite to another part of the planet where it could have been used at a remote location.
It would explain the pyramid network around the world that would be in that period,
Right.
correct?
And
Yeah.
there's also the ideas that were put forward by Nikola Tesla in the wireless distribution of energy, and also, feeding this energy into the ionosphere, but also having it travel through the Earth too. Um, but his Wardenclyffe Tower, he wasn't able to complete his experiment, but he certainly put forward a very imaginative idea that I think, if we could actually follow that and use it, it would have quite a significant impact on our economy.
So it was like wireless electricity.
Wireless electricity, yeah. And there's the Great Pyramid and other standing stone structures would be part of a worldwide grid, I think, in a multi-dimensional kind of effects that you would receive from it, such as harmonizing the planet, being able to mitigate the effects of earthquakes, and drawing off the energy over a period of time, seismic energy over time, rather than allowing it to build up to a point where the plates will slip, and there would be an enormous release of that energy, which would create earthquakes and the resulting loss of life and property that follows it. So there are definitely benefits to that.
Are there any evidences of areas where power was generated besides pyramids?
I think if you researchers have found signatures, acoustic signatures coming out of standing stones. And that's, any kind of acoustic energy is energy. And so, as far as the other pyramids in South America, they have noticed some energetic phenomena around those pyramids. And I do think that there's also, they claim that the Bosnian pyramid, so-called pyramid, has an energetic signature to it. That it is, they have been able to detect energy coming from it.
Chris, what do you think of the obelisk as reference to a secondary? Do you think it's a secondary energy system, sending, receiving, or do you think it's part of that same single network, or maybe it overlaps? I mean, obviously we don't know, but the obelisks themselves ring like bells. So
Right.
Are they connected to the same system, or are they part of a similar technology, but, I don't know, one's music, one's TV?
Yeah, I think that the obelisks served a particular function too, in terms of the energy that was created at Giza, that they were all connected in some way, and even the temples, and their resonance with the energies in Egypt. I think they are significant too. It's an understanding of all of this. There seems to be coming together. There is the research of a NASA scientist on earthquake lights and what creates earthquake lights. And he's been doing studies, and there have been studies done of these power centers around the Earth that where these energies seem to be concentrated. Generally, seismic activity will stress the rock, and then it would ionize certain gases. Maybe a methane gas that is released from the Earth. They would ionize it, and they would note these plasmas that I think they call them what. St. Elmo's fire is one of them, but certainly earthquake lights that have been noted in different areas around the Earth that we may be able to predict at least the occurrence of an earthquake, because these earthquake lights have been showing up before the mechanical displacement of these plates that would cause the ground to move. Before the ground moves, the rock is stressed, and then there is electron flow to the surface. Generally, the high points in the area. And if we look at the Giza power plant, that is definitely a high point, and if there's electron flow or the ground movement, then it would definitely reach the highest point in that area.
Chris, to tie into that, one of the things I try to explain to people in my book was, if you have a worldwide network like this, and yep. I don't try to revisit the pyramid itself, but I try to explain that high technology ancient society, you're on a planet that's spinning, in a solar system that's spinning, in a galaxy that's spinning, and you are constantly moving through. We're trying to balance. If you had a worldwide network of something as large or even larger than a pyramid system, that, of course, if you're multi-generational and you're multi-disaster surviving ancient high-tech society, building in megalithic size does help you manage disasters that you can and cannot control. But if you're ionizing and dealing with the atmosphere, because you're also tuning yourself through the movement of the galaxy, through storms and vibrational energy fields, not in a woo-woo way, but there are energy fields that without a little boost and help from the machining, can help keep the atmosphere, if you're a vibrational frequency in tune, fully 100% conscious human society, you and I might be going to a show that night and you might feel irritated and I might be getting cancer. And my explanation is you go to the half Greek amphitheater, that the vibrations and frequencies that are being retuned because we're heading through a section of the solar system or galaxy with a storm that is throwing off the planet that has otherwise been perfectly maintained and tuned to the correct frequencies and vibrations needed for you to not be irritable or for me to be sick, in a way, theoretically.
Yeah, you're talking about bringing the planet into harmony, or working with Earth energies that also exist out in space.
And they might interfere, with that balance.
Of course, yeah. I mean, there is order created out of chaos. When you look, say for instance, I'll use this example. They were doing research and trying to find. It had been theorized for a long time that the Earth actually had a hum, a very low frequency hum. And so there are a group of Japanese researchers that set out to detect it, see if they could find it, and they succeeded, and they published their work. I think it was in 1997. I didn't come to it later, but I wrote in my book the idea of the Earth actually having a hum. Well, they found this hum, but it was a real jumble of frequencies. It wasn't anything what we would consider pleasing in terms of harmony, but very, very, very jumbled collection of frequencies. Between, I think they said 2 to 7 millihertz. It was, very, very low frequencies. And so, when you look to create order out of that jumble of frequencies, what would you do? You would probably want to create a device that would only resonate in harmony with a certain set of those frequencies. And that's where you get the Great Pyramid and the King's Chamber, that shows that they had tuned the King's Chamber to resonate at the frequencies contained within an S-sharp chord. And so they created harmony and order out of chaos. And so if you can do that with the Earth's plates, the planet, can you also create harmony out of chaos with humans? And can that their mood, the effects of these harmonies be a positive influence on them? I believe that's the case, because I've seen an example of it where people go to these power places, you may call them, where they resonate with the frequencies of the King's Chamber, and they generally come out greatly influenced in a very positive way. That's why I think Egyptian tours are so popular. The experience that you get there is quite transformative.
So are you working with the Kemet School? Are you staying on top of some of these? Like everyone's talking about the labyrinth. Is it? I mean, I know there's a lot of things that are underwater, but are you working with anyone on any of the new stuff or hearing about the latest stuff?
I used to. I did a tour with the what they call the Kemet School. I just did one tour. I no longer do tours with them.
Okay.
I did some with Mohammed Ibrahim. My next tour is going to be with Next NEXT, but we're using the tour guide that worked with John Anthony West. So it's not like I am kind of captured by any particular group or school of thought, so to speak. I work independently.
Yeah.
And I do keep my eye out and to see if there's anything new and significant that is being turned up, particularly with the latest research on the Giza Pyramid project. And the labyrinth, that's a different thing altogether. I mean, I've heard about that. And there was, I think, a gentleman from Netherlands, Patrick Gao, was it Belgium? Patrick Gao, who did some research on the labyrinth. But I have not heard of anybody actually accessing it or, producing any objective evidence to show that it actually exists. So, people will, they will try to create some excitement and, to draw attention to a particular subject. And certainly I keep an open mind because Egypt is full of surprises, and there's more that lies under the surface than what lies on top. So,
yeah. You gotta wonder why they haven't just used some kind of sand vacuum or something and just start sucking all the sand out of Egypt.
Like, just make a giant shop vac that just sucks it into a pile.
Don't they need sand on beaches all over the world? We could just start moving it out. Start getting it out.
It'd be like Spaceballs. You'd have a Mega Maid or something like that. They just combing the sand or sucking up the sand.
Now, let me ask you a question, Chris, and I'm curious. Are there any theories or evidence of one of these power plants having a problem, a catastrophic issue, and exploding and causing a massive event on its own?
Okay, we'll talk about cause and effect now. It's kind of like, okay, a meltdown. Did the pyramid cause the cataclysm, or are the changes and effects that we do see within the Great Pyramid, were they caused by an external force? And I would say that you create a power plant, and you have it functioning. Its function depends on the Earth's energies. You tune it to the Earth. You want a certain amount of throughput of energy from the Earth. It's the Earth. You've developed a system that where you're relying on a known quantity of energy, and then you have a system where you can actually control the fluctuations in that energy, where you will always get fluctuations, obviously. And so you're putting control systems so that if you're working with vibration, there's always the possibility that that you can have a runaway system where the system will tear apart. It will vibrate uncontrollably until it destroys. Now, when you look at, does that cause a worldwide catastrophe? I don't think so. And so I would actually put my money on the fact or the event that it would be an external force that visited the Earth and caused the destruction. And so what we see inside the Great Pyramid, I wrote in my book about the hydrogen in the King's Chamber exploding, and because of external forces and the introduction of oxygen, and then you have the evidence inside the Great Pyramid, in the King's Chamber, also in the Grand Gallery, of there being a huge explosion. Now, the causes of that could be a meteor actually striking the planet, and so what you would have is the introduction of an energy, a source of energy that the pyramids, being actually tuned to the frequencies of the Earth, they cannot dissipate quick enough, and so they self-destruct. Or they just can't pass through that much energy in such a short period of time. Yeah. And so then you have the conditions, what we find in the Great Pyramid, as far as the explosion inside the King's Chamber. But not just that, but you have also the destruction all around the Earth, which explains the tsunamis that are found. And also the destruction of the pyramids and temples. You travel all around Egypt and look at all the different sites, ancient sites, and you can see evidence of the movement of stones that is not the result of just a mere settling of the stone, but a shock, or stones that have been actually thrown up and come crashing down and break apart. And so there is that. And you go into, down the Nile to Luxor and the Karnak temple, the Luxor temple, and there's evidence there that there was destruction. The falling, the destruction of statues falling over, obelisks falling over and breaking, and they even built a wall around one of the obelisks in the Karnak temple, which seems to indicate that they were trying to protect it, and they were perhaps expecting some kind of cataclysm coming their way, and so they set to work to try and protect some of their monuments. And at Luxor, they actually deliberately buried some of the smaller statues that they had, because
Did you see Tanis? Same kind of destruction?
I have just seen photographs of it. Okay. My last tour, we had Tanis on the schedule, but for some reason it was flooded out. They had a storm pass through, and so it was recommended not to go there because it was kind of flooded out.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt, Chris. It was just about I'm assuming you saw the vitrification on some of the stone. Did it all look like it was a wave coming from one direction, or did that you've seen the vitrification, like the high heat, quick dry, the flaking being caused by vitrification. I've always wondered if, because you've been there, first I thought, okay, a meteor hit, or it came at a direction and then there was a wall of heat and everything got exploded, like you're saying, or did it explode because of some weaponized? I can't even imagine, when you think frequencies and energy and the kind of tools and anti-gravity, the kind of weaponized scalar weapons that would be available to a society like this. I was wondering, then if you see vitrification and this destruction from every direction, to me that seems more like it would be weaponized, because it would be coming from multiple directions. Not like we can totally tell, but I'm wondering, could you discern? And then the Egyptians, the dynastics come in, and the Romans come in, and everybody quarry stone. But at least from the areas that were rubble, do you feel like there was some directional evidence of the destruction?
I've heard that people have talked about, this kind of sun flares that will cause tremendous destruction. But I would assume that would have a more broad effect in terms of of the effect of affecting the stone. And I don't know. I think there's. I really can't support the idea of these ancient energy beams. I'm not saying that it's impossible that they existed, but I think also that some materials have been misinterpreted or incorrectly analyzed. And I've been to Egypt with a geologist, and we've looked at some of the spalling that happens that you find at the Aswan quarry, and he said that's perfectly normal that would occur over time under the sun, that you would get that kind of effect. As far as vitrification, I hear people talk about the vitrification of stone. And I am not. Not convinced by that. Some people have claimed that this stone has been vitrified, so therefore they make the claim that the stones were cut using giant mirrors, and focusing sunbeams in order to cut the stone. And so, there's many different ideas out there. I don't necessarily, entertain all of them.
No, just you've been there, and with them, it's so nice to talk to someone who has the machinist's eye, the detail. I have to accomplish that in my historical remodeling. And when you're mixing in 100 years in quotes of people fixing things to polish something into something new, or to cut it in half, or to have to go machine 12 feet of baseboard because it has to be an African mahogany to match the historical. You pointed out the Empire State Building. I was vetted and worked at the First National Bank Building in St. Paul, which I'm in Minnesota, which is also the home of Cold Spring Granite and Quarries, which was one of the suppliers for the Empire State Building.
It's also, you have a true stone up there too, don't you? They make granite surface plates.
Yep. And so the Cold Spring was famous because the First National Bank Building in downtown St. Paul was being built at the same time the Empire State Building was being built, and they were getting stone from the same quarry, and they were both finishing out their main spaces. But at the end, the First National Bank Building still has all African mahogany. And if you are going to do any remodeling, you're required to match what's there.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting to have discerning eyes on what you're seeing. And obviously, we're not speaking geology. We're not speaking to a geologist right now. We're not looking at, like you said, over time, there's a lot of things that can happen. And the speculation was more for, I definitely wanted your input on that as far as listeners go, because I think there's too many. Oh,
there's a lot of misperceptions out there on the methods that are capable of doing the work that you see in Egypt. One of the popular misconceptions is that they were using lasers to cut the stone.
Right.
And that is not a very, very good theory. The evidence argues against it.
What did you think of anything that? Okay, so two questions. One is the schist disc. Did you see it?
Yes.
Yeah. What do you think of that kind of construction? How would you machine that?
How would I create that? It's if it's done by hand, it's an awful lot of painstaking work. The problem with the schist disc that I see it, as I see it, is that now it does not appear to be very precise in terms of roundness, and so I would definitely have to put it on a coordinate measuring machine and check it out to determine its geometry, because I do not claim anything that I see to be machined unless I have been able to determine
Measure it, yeah.
its geometry and precision. Because I'd be setting myself up for failure if I did that. A lot of people do, though, and that is unfortunate. But most of the people who make these claims have not spent any time on machines doing things.
What do you think then of the vases, the 40,000 vases that were pulled out of the step pyramid at Saqqara? Have you seen any of those? They're made out of some.
Yeah.
Now those, what do you think of those?
That is another area that is very, very fascinating. It's very fascinating, and there are these bowls that I would love to take one from the Cairo Museum and measure it. Now, there has been one of these bowls that I was involved in the inspection of it, and it's owned by a gentleman out of New York. And he brought it to Indianapolis. My son, he works in an engineering company, and they have coordinate measuring machines and different inspection equipment for measuring. And we got it up on a rotary table to determine how precise it was. And he also scanned it with a blue light scanner to determine the precision of it. And it's incredibly precise. The problem that I have with it, and I think that I can anticipate the argument coming from an Egyptologist, an academic, would be the chain of custody for this piece.
Provenance, fine, but do you think it's real?
The provenance of it, and the chain of custody, and because it was purchased through an antique dealer or a dealer in antiquities, and so that is an area that I am really not interested in getting into. So, it looks Egyptian, most certainly. Looks Egyptian. It has definitely been machined. The precision of it is so significant that there's no other way to describe it as being a machined artifact.
I'm curious.
Even the lugs on it. You know how those bowls look. They have this like flange top. And then the body of it on the outside, they have two lugs that are diametrically opposed to each other. And the shape of those and the orientation of them is within 0.005 of an inch if you rotate. But I used an indicator and I put it on the lugs just to see how they matched each other. And they're within 0.005 of an inch.
That's incredible.
Very precise.
And they're different. The thing that fascinates me is that they're out of some of what should be, if you're using anything to lathe these vases, is the complexity of the shattering of the smallest crystal or the smallest imperfection to shape the variety of the vases that appear to be of the same quality. What are the chances of you being able to get at least one of those? How would you even apply for a permit for you to be able to check that? Would they let you go for that?
Well, I would encourage an Egyptian engineer to do that work. The Egyptians today have the same tools and the same knowledge of manufacturing that we do. So they could take it upon themselves to say, okay, make a proposal to the Supreme Council of Antiquities to take one of those artifacts out of the Cairo Museum and take it to the university lab or a manufacturing lab, and do that work there. It would be I think better received, and more doable than if I was to go over there and asked to do the same thing.
Well, not that they're listening. Do you think that you have someone in mind, and we can? I mean, what kind of financial support do they need to do something like this?
I don't know. It would be up to them. I mean, I think it would. I have no idea.
Yeah,
it'd be death. Oh, I just think it'd be death by 1,000 cuts if we can just keep going at the machining side of this.
All right.
What do you mean? I don't understand that.
The house of cards on this was done with copper chisels or diorite balls, or just the level of machining required to produce all of this just doesn't seem.
Oh well, yes. I mean, I've been told, okay, we get it already. You're right. You're absolutely right. Now what? And and so it's kind of like that shift, that paradigm shift has happened among the pretty much the general population, people like us, technical type people. That's already been accomplished. There's not, somebody like you or like me, it doesn't take that much to convince. But the political hurdles and the cultural implications, cultural, religious, the Supreme Council of Antiquities, getting them to accept it and actually risk exposing the lie, so to speak. Not a lie, but the incorrect information that they've been teaching since the dawn of Egyptology. That is a bigger fish to fry, in my opinion. And I'm not sure it's going to, that hurdle is going to be, we're going to be over that hurdle in my lifetime. But the ball is rolling for sure,
Well, let me ask you a question, Chris.
The gene is not going back in the bottle anytime soon.
Let me ask you a question, Chris. We are out of time, unfortunately. I have one more question for you, and we're gonna have to wrap this up to let you get about your evening. If you were to tell the younger archaeologists that are just now getting in the field what to look for, what we need to find, and where to look, what would that be?
To a younger archaeologist?
Yeah, what is it we need to find to further prove this theory?
Well, archaeology is all about excavation, and I can't help but think that there are still some tools that are buried under the sand, but where they would look to find them, I have no idea. I think maybe the Giza Plateau would be a good place, but referring back to the comment that taking a vacuum cleaner out there and sucking away all the sand, it becomes more relevant. But that's not the way archaeology is conducted. They have to lay out grids and remove things very carefully and sift them and examine everything. So it's not going to be a construction contractor's cleanup project. I would try to encourage an archaeologist entering the field to listen to engineers and get their opinions.
All right.
That's all I would do.
All right. So there's not like a a single piece of evidence that's missing to prove your theory conclusively that we need to find to be able to put it into place? Like what puzzle pieces are you missing to complete the puzzles? What I'm saying.
Well, I think it's a state of mind, really, and it's very hard to for an Egyptologist to adopt a machinist, toolmaker, engineer's point of view because they haven't been there. So, I would. Engineers could be convinced just by looking at it and relating it to their background and what they have learned in their careers. They are not. They would not necessarily will ask the argument in order to be convinced. Well, where are the machines? I need to see the machine in order for you to prove to me that a machine did that. They know how things can be made, and they know the mark of machines, and so they would just assume that a machine did it based on the evidence, even though that evidence may be considered circumstantial. But somebody who is not trained that way would say, well, I need to see the machines to understand what you're talking about or even believe what you're saying. And so, it's just a matter of mindset. I mean, and then it depends on, what you've been taught to believe. And even if you're taught to believe that civilization is linear and, we're at the apex of advancement and nobody before us has actually achieved such a high level. And you have that belief that the ancient Egyptians had certain primitive tools, and without any tools to prove how this object was made, then you have to rely on expert testimony. And if you're not going to even seek expert testimony from engineers to give their opinion on these artifacts, then you're just going to continue believing what you've been taught to believe. So
All right.
that's just my take on it right now.
All right. Jared, you're going to stick with me till the end. And Christopher, you want to tell everybody where they can find you?
Generally, I'm in Danville, Illinois, but please don't come searching for me. No. I would ask people, they can find me at gizapower.com. That's my website,
right.
gizapower.com. And please visit and take a look. I have different articles there. I have pages of photographs of the different machined artifacts that I discuss in my books. There are links. There's a link there to my tour with NEXT in September of this year. There's even a video and articles on the explorations of Southern Shaft in the Queen's Chamber. There's photographs of the Temple of Dendera Hyperstyle Hall, which is a miracle in stone, I think. The Temple of Luxor, Abu Wash stone, which is a smoking gun. I call it a smoking gun. That shows that they were actually sawing stones with saws that are over 37 feet in diameter.
That's
quite
crazy.
Remarkable. Yeah, crazy, right?
I've seen them at St. Cloud. I've been there. I've looked at the quarries. I've looked at what they can do. Nobody can do that.
Right. So, and the thing is that somebody who is in quarrying or manufacturing, they see evidence of a 37-foot saw, and they're like, "Yeah, okay, I get that." But it's like, wow, the ancient Egyptians were using mega machines. That's really, that's crazy. How could no, that's not possible. Well, we use mega machines now, right?
Yeah, we just need to find them, right?
Yeah. Right. Well, it'd be nice to find them, but actually see what they had produced, that's exciting too.
All right.
Well, there's no, like what Christopher is saying about the mindset. It's you find the facts you're looking for, like Cremo has said, and in this case, it's having a mindset that there is a irrelevant to the missing chapter. There is a consistent level of technology that doesn't align itself with dynastic Egyptians, and they keep finding it. So if we keep digging and you come up on a site where you have the first layer, the seventh layer, the 10th layer is all above a very finely cut, like the Osirian or the Serapeum boxes, you're going to find that, I think, much further out. I guess what I'm more excited about also is that they said it 30 years ago that 95% of Egypt is buried still in the sand. Well, what does that look like? And then Mohammed, just a few weeks ago when we had him on, was like, well, Jared, they say it's underground, but they don't tell you that it's in all these very, very finely done underground structures. So what is there that we're going to find? I think it's having that open-faced assessment of, okay, it's not the paradigm we've been told, it's not the narrative we've been preaching, it's got to be something else. So we just have to look at what we're finding. We have to look for the saw cuts. We have to look at the level of complexity of construction. Is it frequency and energy based? Is it it's been readapted and they tiled it, but what's under the tile? We have to be willing to look at future nanoarchaeology and just be digging, but be aware and not just worry about finding a cool mummy or a golden statue.
All right. And I would recommend everybody check out Chris's site. It's gizapower.com. The link will be in the description down below. Chris, thanks very much for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Nice talking to you.
All right. We'll be right back on Conflict Radio right after this. And welcome back to Conflict Radio. That was Christopher Dunn. Jared, how'd it go?
Well, that was really great. There's so much information that, again, you can't do it in one interview. And it was just really fun to have him on with the details out there, with everybody having it on the radar now about where this is going. I had no idea he started the book actually in 1977, though. I did not know.
I was 2. You weren't even born yet, were you?
You were finding archaeological finds in your pants.
Yeah, but you weren't even thought of.
Me, I was already riding around a big wheel by the time you were too, mister.
What are you talking about? You're not older than I am. You're in your 30s.
That's right. Thank you. That is correct.
All right. Well, Jared, you want to tell everyone where they can find you? Well, first off, let me ask you, did you learn anything today?
Oh, yeah, there was a bunch of stuff. I mean, so the detail on the Serapeum, the Mohammed was not able to get, that's really funny that they jacked the price for Christopher Dunn. So that's a good lesson. Don't go to Egypt and be anything but just a backpacking European. That was incredibly important for people touring. Do not appear to have money. So if you want to get to the closed section of the Serapeum and other places, that was cool to know. And the details on the disaster areas and the quarrying of the stone and the specifically Roman quarrying off. I mean, you assume that everyone's done it, but to hear specifically about the Romans quarrying off on the pyramid itself, it also kind of gives you an idea of when areas were sacred or they didn't care. So it does make you wonder about how long did the dynastic peoples even respect or consider certain places, important or not. What did you think?
I thought it was fascinating. It's be interesting to learn. There was a lot of places I wanted to go with that interview where I guess we just didn't have enough time, like you said. But I'm curious to learn, in order, like if the power is going up into the stratosphere, if all of the pyramids have to be on at the same time to create the effect needed. If one pyramid went down, say for maintenance, would they all go down? You know what I mean? Like, just different questions like that. But I mean, we probably don't even have the answers to. But I mean,
Well, it's right. It's all the above, and it's just fascinating. The subject is so vast. The work that he did, it's again, it's obvious when he says, "Hey, it's someone in construction, somebody in engineering." It's astounding that nobody follows it up with. Again, it's not about shaming anyone, but when you look at academia and go, how do you pull everyone into a construction project except people who do construction? How do you make a call on a complexity of a building when you're concerned about the romance of the anthropology of the society and what they were saying and what they were doing, all of which is like making a pinhole in a magazine or a book and saying, "Tell me the content."
yeah, like
Just-
like if I take my computer, say my desktop computer, and I pull all the guts out of it and just throw the casing on the ground, an archaeologist coming around, 100 years from now isn't going to know it's a computer. You know what I mean? He's just going to see the casing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, he wouldn't
That
have
once
any
it's been
idea.
adapted
You
and
would have to get like an engineer or somebody who actually knows, about computers or about things to be like, oh, well, this looks like it could have been a casing for a computer, blah, 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 blah. Archaeologist isn't going to know that. Same thing with the pyramids, right?
No different. Absolutely no different. You can't expect someone who's been looking into the anthropology. It doesn't mean that they don't know things. It's just that how you could have them look at the structural engineering feats and make a call about the complexities of the tools, the machining, the measuring. There's a lot to the word measuring. We think like a ruler or a tape measure, but what they're talking about, what Christopher's talking about, isn't just fine, detailed billionth, by the way, millionth and billionth of an inch calipers and measuring devices. Those are really important, but frequencies and wave measuring devices, that's all sorts of electronic listening devices that wouldn't appear like anything. There's plenty of meters that electricians use that would look like nothing to us today if it was just an empty box or handheld, or there would be no ohm, like you wouldn't recognize it or acknowledge it as the technology it is.
Yeah.
And the schist disc that he pointed out, when you look at it in pictures, it always looks okay. It was found broken. It was put back together. It's not in great shape. But if you account for the fact that it was broken, they put it back together kind of half-ass. But in the sense that Christopher's looking at it saying, oh, it doesn't look that perfectly done. But we're also dealing with a society that, and this is what we mean about getting younger, like you were asking. You asked a really important question. What would younger archaeologists or new people who have opened eyes do? Well, if you're considering frequency and wave technology, then you have to consider that the same reason that stone spheres are not perfect everywhere, but they're like really like strangely perfect. Well, it could be because of the specific frequencies and waves that they're dealing with. So the schist disc may have been shaped specifically for a function and not.
Yeah, I would like to put it on a stick and spin it around and see what kind of noise it makes.
Oh God, it would fall apart because they glued it back together. But to your point, they have engineered copies, but there's the other thing that's missing. It's one, it's broke. Two, it's aged. I mean, what if it's literally had ever so slowly bits of it fall off, like on the surface level? I mean, what if it is getting old? Or what if it was polished? What if it was touched? Like, what if it was constantly handled for 1,000 years, 100 years? I mean, you've seen old staircases at castles or at even churches where they're the stone has worn out where the feet go, or a wishing space where there's either a statue that's metal or even granite where you're supposed to touch something for good luck, and it's been polished and polished down over years of years. Hell, you can go to an IKEA for that. And so the reality is that the schist disc could have been damaged from use. It could have been damaged from just being not used. Both. Then it was broken. Then it was put back together. But if we were able to measure it with the tolerances that he's talking about topically over the entire surface of it and recreate it exactly the way it's supposed to be. Not perfect, but with the shape that it has. I wonder, like you said, if you spin it, what the hell would the frequency of it be? Or what kind of wave? Is it pushing? Is it pulling air? Is it pushing or pulling something else? Is it for liquids? I mean, we actually don't know at all, but it definitely looks like some sort of a flywheel.
Yeah. I mean, it could be a propeller for a boat even. You know, I mean, that might be stupid to say, but I mean, it could be anything. I mean, we don't have any idea, really. So anyway, I don't know if you're there or not, but you want to tell everyone where they can find you?
Yeah, that would be at notaliens.com. You can find me on, the whole, I guess the Amazon is out there for just a book. Otherwise, you can certainly get one signed by me that I will bring to the post office and drop in the mail for you. And I do have a member area, of course, for exclusive content and interviews. You can join me there at notaliens.com.
Awesome. And the link will be in the description box below. Remember, you can always find us online. Just go to www.conflictradio.net. You can find us on Apple iTunes, Spreaker, and all of your normal podcast catchers. If you have an app for podcasts, just search for Conflict Radio. We are there. Remember, you can always find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. And that's it. Batten down the hatches, enjoy your day, and be safe.